when I think about the concept of classroom community, I'm reminded of the work of Margaret Wheatley, who is rooted in community, and her quote that there's no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about is kind of at the core of what I believe is important about classroom communities. And so that care piece and finding out what our students care about in conjunction with the educators in the room is how classroom communities are built.
Inclusive education work is part of who I am, how I am in the world. I grew up in the disabilities community. All of my teaching, my practice, my research circles back, whether I choose to or not, to inclusive education and thinking about how are we developing inclusive learning communities that welcome the ways of knowing, the knowledges, the strengths, the competencies of all learners.
For inclusion, I think the focus is actually shifting a lot. I think it used to mean, how do we include those kids with disabilities? And what it's really becoming is, how do we really create communities that just foster diversity?
You look around with Black Lives Matter, the residential school system, all of these things, and just being open and candid.
Being in a supportive learning community is the only way that we can reach all of our students. So collaboration to me is the most effective way. I think it takes many minds to be able to reach the students that you have. We need a little help from our peers to see the different starting points that some of our kids are coming at or coming in with, what they're bringing with them, because all of us as adults have a different lens on these students.
We do a lot of talking about making sure our learners feel seen and heard, but we don't always talk about how we might actually value them and ensure that our learners know that they're valued. And so I think that's a really important component in developing a supportive learning community.
That feeling of being welcomed, being safe, connected, contributing and engaged is really the components for community to begin to develop and grow. And so it starts with acknowledging the gifts that students have and bring into the room each day and what they can contribute. And then it's thinking about what are the possibilities that are created in each classroom. And I said, as that it develops, then true community is formed and can continue to grow.
We were trying to connect with the goal of us showing that we cared about them, because that was a big thing with that group. And think about now, I think that's a big thing with all of these groups that we have and with every group in general, is just to show that we cared and that we actually wanted to move forward to a solution instead of just basically telling them what they were doing wrong and everyone being frustrated.
It's a safe space, and that whether those students don't feel safe at home, which can sometimes be the case, they feel accepted. And then students that speak different languages or come from different cultural backgrounds, that the other students here who haven't been exposed to that start to understand that there's a big world out there.
You can't just re-earth exactly what you did last year every year. Each year you have to take a look at where your own teaching practice is at, which supports you have available to you, and who, first and foremost, who your kids are. Being able to look at your class as a whole and teach to the class you have, not the class that you had last year or that you maybe wish you had.
That's where the creative side of teaching can come in, is how do you welcome everyone into this experience. I am really fortunate with the age group that I work with, that they allow me that creativity, but they also provide so many solutions, for lack of a better word. You've created the space and the place for you to go on a learning journey with them.
There's the knowledge, there's a belief system that a teacher holds, and then there's the actual practice. So I think establishing all three of these in synchronous with each other at the beginning of the year is really important. So what I mean by belief system is believing in children. It's not up to us to determine what's wrong with them. It's up to us
to figure out what they know and what they bring with them so we can build upon that. The practice that we create is based on our beliefs, because practice is a reflection of beliefs, and it comes down to the language we use, which is connected to how we view children.
One of my favorite things I do with my kids at the beginning of the year is I tell them September is all about getting to know each other, and there's no pressure on anything else. Everything we do together is about learning something new. It's about stepping out of your comfort zone. It's about building trust, getting vulnerable, and I myself do that as well.
Most important things in my class is creating a community. So we love the morning meeting in my classroom, and it also creates some self-awareness, and as well as builds confidence for students, especially at the beginning of the year. It allows kids to tell pretty much anything, share about themselves, or a way for us to connect and get to know one another.
Providing an access point and planning. What do I want all of my students to know and be able to do? What do I want? How do I want to layer onto that for some of them and for a few of them, right? So really making differentiation like come to life.
One really important idea that we examined together is presuming competence. It is it's an idea that really challenges us to look at students differently than how we have historically, especially in the world of disability, where everything is coming from a norm reference perspective and looking for what kids can't do. That presuming competence really forces us to say, okay, but what can kids do?
So we'll do writing, for instance, and we'll do lots of different pieces of writing. I'll give them different varieties, choices, comics. They never am I here write an essay. It's, they've got comics they can write. They've got video scripts. They've got poems, all wonderful pieces. And then at the end, every 2 weeks, I say, okay, guys, pick the one you're most proud of, but you need to tell me why you're most proud of it. And I want you to highlight 2 or 3 sentences that really stand out for you.
I'll spread out a blanket and the kids will play, and then I'll just pull kids to read with me kind of throughout the day. So I'm able to really focus on and differentiate for each child, and then not have to worry about managing the others because they're playing and they're learning and exploring doing that. And then we have a deal that when I call you, when I make the owl sound and call you over, it's time for you to come in and challenge yourself and work really hard, and then you go back and keep playing again. And they're really good about that. They take that on and they really push themselves when it's their turn. The first week of WACTIP, I would say, we came here to New Denver and we spoke with Terry, and then we went and we walked down, we visited the Nikkei Center, the Center for the Japanese Internment. And that wasn't something that I had expected that we were going to do. And my family was interned. I remember that kind of sense of overwhelm and breaking down in front of my class that I just met and that kind of thing. And it was such a powerful moment for me and such an important lesson to just recognize that our students' contexts are different than ours. For me, in kind of my practice now, and that's something I really consider, is who are the students in my class? What do I need to know about them to keep them safe? And how can I build my classroom in such a way that all voices are heard and we can talk about what needs to be talked about in a way that is supportive of everyone.
Something I'm really passionate about is challenging hierarchies in the outdoor classroom with students. And the way that can come through with young students is that we can look at the way that we interact with the more than human, and we can talk about those relationships. Sometimes students will come across a more than human creature and they might try to name it, or they might get annoyed by it and squish it and have this relationship that's very dominant with it. And I like to break down that relationship and why is it that we feel that we are better than a worm? And what is it that puts us on top of the worm that feels like we can pick it up and play with it in our hands and name it Bob? So some of the things that I do, I focus on language really strongly out there. So we only use they, them pronouns for things in nature because there is no gender binary in nature. It's something that I explain to the students that this is a human construct and you're not going to see a boy worm wearing pants and a girl worm wearing a dress. So instead we use they, them pronouns. We often drop the articles, so I'll say not a cedar tree, just cedar tree. And I encourage them to not give them names that are often colonial. It's not colonial practice to name things. And we talk about, well, what would cedar tree actually like to be named? And so sometimes you can talk about the relationship, and often I can refer to Indigenous languages that don't name things according to nouns. They name things according to the relationship with it, and it's often more of a verb. So we might go and there's a tree that we often talk about what we could refer to the tree, and they'll say the climbing tree, the tree that offers me shade, the tree that throws off those sticky things that get stuck in my hair. And when they start thinking about things in terms of a relationship, then they start understanding how they have to be accountable to that relationship.
I often work with students in small collaborative groups that stay the same throughout the course. And part of that structure is they get to say what they're contributing to the group in terms of like what skills they bring, and they get to say what they need from others. The expectation that they're working together and supporting each other and giving them ways to frame that. I see the classroom as a culture and like a way of being together. Like I really believe in breaking down this idea that there's a kind of a normal brain, normal way of being, and inviting in a range of ways of thinking and being. For me, the bottom line is more people get to be in the room.